afternoon. I'm Assemblyman Richard Brodsky. I'm joined by Mr. Harpreet Tour, a well-known activist in the South Asian community, and Mr. Gregory Davidson, a well-known activist in the Russian-American community. A week from today, New Yorkers will go to the polls expecting to be able to cast their votes in ways that they have come to expect. It should be easy, it shouldn't be complicated, and it should be accessible to all registered voters. That is not going to be the case. The set of decisions and problems that have arisen over the last year or so leave the potential for mass voter disenfranchisement on Tuesday next at the primary. And the situation is likely to get infinitely worse. We've distributed to you a letter I have sent today to the United States Department of Justice asking for the DOJ to use its statutory discretion to send observers, federal observers in, to those Voting Rights Act communities subject to their jurisdiction. We've asked the State Board of Elections and the City Board of Elections to do an emergency assessment of the situation and to take immediate steps to avoid what right now could be a real catastrophe. The reason is simple. New Yorkers are switching from the old mechanical lever voting machines to a new computerized voting machine. That transition would have been difficult enough without the complications that have arisen. Let me go through several of them. The ballot is likely to be, for most people, illegible. The old machine ballot had a roughly 30 by 20 ballot that listed everybody's names with symbols of their parties. You could read it. Because the new computer machine will only accept an 11 by 17 ballot, the printing on the ballot is so small that the Board of Elections in New York City has decided as of 2 days ago to distribute magnifying glasses to every polling place in the city, because otherwise people will not be able to read the ballot. That is not going to solve the problem for minority language communities where, for example, the Chinese and Korean pictographs for certain words are so large that the translated ballot is even in worse shape than it would be for English-speaking, English-reading voters. There is simply not enough personnel to train people because the new voting process will require additional steps. It used to be you went in, you registered, you were taken to a machine, you cast your ballot, you walked out. It's not the way it's going to be. You're going to register at a table. You're then going to be given a paper ballot, and you're going to go to what's called a privacy booth. At the privacy booth, you're going to mark your ballot with a pen on in a circle next to the name of the person you want. You're then going to go over and actually cast the ballot in a machine. If the machine thinks you've made a mistake, it will light up and give you a choice, a red button or a green button. If you press the red button, your ballot will come back and you can recast the ballot. If it comes in green, if you press green, your ballot will be cast and counted even if you cast it incorrectly, so your vote doesn't count. There are insufficient translators. The federal government only requires translation in New York City of 4 languages: Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, and Korean. We have representatives here of 2 major non-English speaking groups who have literally hundreds of thousands of registered voters. They are likely in large numbers to be disenfranchised by the lack of translators, the lack of ballots in their native tongue, the lack of staff to help them go through that. The public education program that the City of New York engaged in the words of the Board of Elections of the City of New York, is grossly inadequate. In a letter to the Mayor's Office of Budget, the Board of Elections asked the Mayor's Office, and this is written down in the press release, which election they would want canceled because they simply do not have the resources to run this election in the right way. The Board of Elections is doing its best and should not be viewed as the bad guy in this unfolding saga. Put it all together, the illegibility of the ballot, the complications of the machine, the lack of staff, the lack of public training, the lack of resources, and we have a looming disaster. As I've said, today I've asked the United States Department of Justice to intervene by sending in observers, and we've sent letters to the Board of Elections of the city and the state asking for an immediate statewide and citywide assessment of the problem. I'm first going to turn this over to Assemblyman Bill Colton from Brooklyn, who has been extremely active in trying to solve this problem in the borough of Brooklyn. Mr. Cole.
Thank you. I want to express my thankfulness to Mr. Brodsky for calling this to the attention, because we do face a possible disaster on Tuesday primary day. I have a district which has many newcomers, many people whose English is not their primary language, and we face problems as a result of that. That, with all the other circumstances, including the fact that the actual sample ballot, the writing on it is very small. This is the sample ballot that the Board of Elections has been giving out in their demonstrations. And one of the parts which says how many people to vote for, very small. And we understand, why the Board of Elections feels the need to try to get everything on one page, but the print is very small. And even though they are going to make available in the polling sites a magnifying sheet, the reality is that this, added to all the other problems, leads us to a potential disaster. We also have a problem in that there may not be sufficient poll inspectors and Board of Elections personnel at the polling places. In the past, under the old system, there were 4 inspectors at each table, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Under the new system, the ED table will only have 1 Democrat and 1 Republican. And in order for them to be able to take their dinner break, and they'll be working from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. at night, they will need a dinner break, a lunch break. They will not have, in our opinion, sufficient relief inspectors. They may only have 2 relief inspectors for 3 EDs. So they've got to replace 10 inspectors and give breaks when they only have 2 people available for that purpose. And it would be a disaster to have only 1 Republican or 1 Democrat alone at a table controlling unused paper ballots, which, if they were, because the person was distracted, if someone were to get their hands on those paper ballots and get them into the scanner machines, we would have absolute chaos. So this is a situation where people's right to vote is definitely threatened. And we need to take some action. The Justice Department, the State Board of Elections needs to look at this situation before it happens. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mr. Brodsky, by calling this to our attention, is taking the preventive action that is needed, rather than waiting till after a disaster happens and then deal with the consequences. What he is doing is he's taking the action in advance. In particular, in my district, Russian American voters are very confused as to how to vote, because the instructions will not be in Russian. I have introduced, and a bill was passed in the state legislature with Mr. Brodsky's support, whereby we directed the Board of Elections to translate their website into Russian, where we directed them to transfer a brochure explaining voting procedures into Russian. Till now, they have not done that. I've received a letter from the Board of Elections 2 weeks ago saying that one of their vendors translated instructions about the new voting procedures and opened a website with those instructions and inadvertently did not translate it into Russian. That is not an acceptable explanation. People may lose their right to vote because they do not have the information available that they need. And we need to do something about it now and not wait until after a disaster occurs.
Thank you,